Chapter 43. October 25th, 2173, 2146. Ilium to Sail System. Nos Astra, Ad Astra HQ. Ilium Branch, Secure Conference Room. So what does our mysterious and impartial sixth member have to say? And why did she contact you and not any of us? Normally, she would send the message to all of us at once so that everyone knows the same, asked Nisko Ron. And despite being interrupted every few words due to his respirator, the sarcasm and a hint of suspicion were clear to hear in his voice. Hearing Nisko Ron speak that way surprised me quite a bit. In the few months we knew each other, he always kept any emotion out of his voice whenever the circle met, trying not to offend anybody or give any of his cards away. And even if it was just us, it took effort on my side to derive anything from the tone of his voice. So to hear it so clearly did take me by surprise. I do not know why the Arbiter only contacted me. Perhaps it was by design or by necessity. Just like it is with you all, the Arbiter ignores any of my messages unless it concerns access to the Circle's funds, replied Cesario, clearly annoyed by Nisko Ron's suspicion. I'll forward you the message so nobody can say I'm lying. I'm sure all of you will find the usual identifiers that prove that the message truly comes from the Arbiter. Nobody is accusing you of faking the message, said Nasara softly, and as Cesario turned to her, his eyes turned softer for a moment. It's just that it's different from what we're used to, and any deviations from an established pattern always rouse some suspicion. With everything that is currently happening on Ilium, it is only prudent to question such deviations. Her words seemingly helped to cool the tempers before they could become heated, and any annoyance that Nisko Ron and Cesario displayed toward each other disappeared, at least for the moment. We will check the message after you send it to us, I said, trying to push the conversation onward. But that's just standard protocol, at least for me, and I'm sure the others do that as well. So can you please tell us what this message says? I'm sure you have noticed, but I have a slight mercenary problem that needs my attention. After all, that was one of the reasons why you called this meeting, right? Otherwise, you would just have sent a message yourself. Perhaps I wasn't using the most diplomatic or delicate approach, but I didn't want to wait until one of them deigned themselves to direct the conversation that way. Every minute I wasted with meaningless chatter was 1 minute where the whole situation with Eclipse could change in a dramatic way, and I wasn't in the mood to waste anything at the moment. The burning look Cesario sent me for interrupting the time he looked at Nasara like a love-struck puppy was offset by the grateful look and approving nod Nisko Ron sent me. He, just like I, had better things to do and would push the meeting forward whenever it started to drift away from important topics. Some you win, some you lose, I thought to myself as I took in the two completely different looks I got. And after comparing the two, I definitely came out ahead in the balance. While Cesario had been an all-right partner, Nisko Ron was by far the more important between the two of them. So anything that won me just that little bit of favor from him was worth Cesario's temporary annoyance at me. The Turian would get over it, and if not, well, he outlived his usefulness for me anyway. Right, said Cesario slowly and narrowing his eyes at me, his mandibles flaring. We have to discuss Denebren's actions. After all, the actions of one circle member can fall back on the others. I narrowed my own eyes as I noticed the hostility hidden in Cesario's words. How I earned it, I could only guess. Maybe some of the mercenaries supporting the local Eclipse chapter were some of his customers, and with my personnel eradicating them like weeds in a garden, his profits had to take a massive financial loss with their demise. No matter what, I wouldn't apologize for that. They attacked me first, and if Cesario took on such poor excuses of mercenaries as customers, then it was his own fault. In fact, the Arbiter's message contains some points concerning Denebren's conduct. While she does not condemn Denebren's actions, as they were clearly in response to being attacked by the opposing party first, she does notify us that the Circle funds are currently unavailable and that this fighting has to be done with their own funds. She does not want the Circle funds to be used in something that could lead toward the destruction of Ilium. When Cesario finished relaying the Arbiter's message, he sent me a smile that wouldn't have been out of place on a shark's face. Apparently, I really had done something that burned more than a few bridges with him. It wouldn't matter to him that I had done it unknowingly and unintentionally, just that I had done it. Please, interjected Nisko Ron before I could respond to Cesario's taunting smirk. Forward the message to us now. I would like to confirm its contents for myself. His smirk lessening, Cesario turned to Nisko Ron for a moment before looking down and tipping with his claws on a terminal in front of him that I couldn't see as the holographic projection stopped a bit above where a human's belly button would be. A ring notified me that the message arrived, but I didn't look down. In fact, my eyes hadn't left Cesario's form since he finished talking. I took everything in, his posture, which muscles twitched, how often his mandibles moved, in which direction his eyes flickered, the intonation of every word he uttered. Something was going on, that much I realized. Yet what had triggered this antagonism? Was he backing my still unknown opponent? Was he it? Questions upon questions appeared in my mind, and before I knew it, the meeting continued as Nisko Ron confirmed the content of the Arbiter's message to me and the others. So now that you have confirmed that I've relayed the Arbiter's message without adding or removing parts, what should we do? After all, Denebren's actions have consequences for us all, and I was about to propose a business venture that would need some of the circle funds to get off the ground without straining my resources. I wanted to scoff at Cesario's statement. While he knew some powerful people all over the galaxy, if one broke his essence down, he was nothing more than a glorified gunrunner. Any business venture he proposed that would need circle funds would certainly be nothing more than a gigantic shopping spree. Or perhaps he wanted to buy a small fleet of frigates and cruisers or a dreadnought. There was nothing else that I could think of that Cesario would show any interest in as a worthy business. If Nisko Ron hadn't been wearing his environmental suit, I would have seen the same expression on his face that I was trying my best to suppress. Yet there was something else in his posture. Turning my attention away, while at the same time not trying to be obvious, I studied him. It wasn't even remotely obvious. It wasn't even something physical, and perhaps a holographic image wasn't the best medium to convey those feelings. But somehow I knew that there was a growing aura of suspicion around Nisko Ron. I ignored Cesario when he opened his mouth again to try to turn the others against me, even once mentioning that my membership in the circle should be questioned as it endangered each of their own operations. It was obvious that the only one interested in his words was Nasara, but only to reassure him that it wasn't necessary and that his worries were unfounded. Everyone else just let his words wash over them without caring much about them. In the end, nothing was decided, and the meeting ended without much fanfare. Yet, before I cut the connection, Nisko Ron turned toward me and threw me a meaningful look. There was nothing that indicated what he wanted from me, but instead of leaving the room after the meeting ended, I waited in my chair, leaning back and relaxing for a moment. It didn't take long before the intercom activated and the voice of the comm officer, Bearman, came through. Sir, we got a request for another secure connection. The sender's signature reads as Nisko Ron. Shall I put him through or not, sir? It took me only a moment to decide. Put him through and make sure that the connection is secured with our highest encryption protocols, even higher than the ones for the previous meeting. There wasn't any immediate response, but I could hear the light tipping sounds of fingers hitting a holographic keyboard. Of course, sir. Our side is secured. I can't say anything about the other. We're rerouting the connection over several server nodes and hiding it among the usual chatter of Ilium's business district. Very well, put him through. It took only a few more seconds longer before the holographic form of Nisko Ron reappeared directly in front of me on the other side of the conference table. I believe I won't have to voice my doubts concerning whatever idiocy Cesario wanted us to believe. Nisko Ron began without any preamble. I rolled my eyes and answered. You mean his constant deriding of my actions? His constant wailing that my actions restricted him in his actions? The only thing I believe him in is that my actions cost him money. But that is his own fault for having such partners who thought going against me was a good idea. You will not hear any different from me, agreed Nisko Ron. Yet there is more to his actions than you believe. How so? I asked, leaning forward in my chair, interested in what he had to say. You must know that I've been a member of the Circle for far longer than Cesario, so I know that he had problems with an up-and-coming mercenary company, not unlike the situation you're in right now. Of course, that mercenary company wasn't anywhere close to Eclipse, neither in manpower, connections, or resources, yet alike nonetheless. I nodded at Niskoran's recounting, and I guess that at the time, there wasn't any meeting or member who tried to censor him. Or am I wrong? You would be correct with your guess, so that makes Ceteria's actions quite hypocritical. I wouldn't be the first time with a hypocrite. Hell, I'm one at the times too, and I'm sure you did have your moments as well. That is a statement I can't refute, he agreed. Yet that isn't the only thing that got me suspicious. Please come to the point, I said with a sigh. While it was interesting, I knew that Nisko had something far more important to say than this. At the time, the Arbiter allowed Cesario to draw from the Circle funds to support his endeavors against that mercenary company at a zero-interest rate. Blinking was all I could do after Nisko dropped this particular piece of information. That wasn't what I had expected when this second meeting started. What? Was all I could say. I had the same reaction when Cesario relayed the Arbiter's message. It just doesn't make sense that the Arbiter is changing their approach. Of course, it could also be that the person who uses the persona of Arbiter changed in the last few years, yet I haven't noticed any other change. Not in their choice of words, nor in their approach. This was the first time they completely changed their way, and I don't like it. You wouldn't contact me if that was all your suspicion was based on. It's nothing more than a hunch right now. And if I know you even a little bit, you wouldn't say anything to anyone if a hunch was all you had. There was a moment of silence between us where we just looked at each other, not saying a word. Because I was waiting for an answer, and Nisko, because he was considering how much he wanted to share with me. As you know, the financial world of Ilium is my playground. I know the stocks, the various deals the banks here make, and how to follow a money trail further than most. You also know that information here on Ilium is its own currency, and when I heard about your problems, you searched for the money trail to sell the information to me, probably in exchange for the half of the shares I control, I finished for him. Instead of answering, Nisko just nodded in my direction, confirming my thoughts. There wasn't any reason to be upset with Nisko. It was just business for him. He saw an opportunity to gain something and acted accordingly. If I had been in his position, I would have done the same without any hesitation or second thoughts about the person I wanted to owe me. Yet it seems like something was wrong on one end of the money trail, or else you wouldn't hesitate so much and we would discuss a price about now, I continued, bringing an end to the slight pause between us. Sounds about right, but when I followed the money, something unexpected came to light. At first, everything was as I expected. Eclipse, some minor mercenary groups, and some gangs got paid to attack you. Some more than others, but that was to be expected if one takes into account how much they can bring to bear in Eclipse's case. The money got sent over 3 or 4 dozen fake accounts and middlemen. I couldn't follow the money to a singular source. The ones obscuring the trail were very good at what they were doing, yet I could identify some of the accounts where the money went through. And what I found does concern me. For a moment, Nisko stopped to take a breath, and to me, it seemed like he had to fortify himself before he could speak the words he wanted to say out loud. Some of those accounts are under the control of the Circle. When I processed Nisko's words, I jumped up, throwing my chair to the floor in my haste, and hammered the palms of my hands on the table in front of me. What did you just say? I almost screamed, a growl escaping my throat in my anger. Is that the truth? What the fuck is going on? Perhaps it wasn't that surprising to me if I took into account Cesario's sudden hostility. Yet there was something wrong with that picture. I can understand your anger, Nisko responded with a calm voice, trying to get me to calm down. It was just as shocking to me when I found out. Furthermore, I know for certain that Cesario knows about 1 or 2 of those accounts too, since he had to repay his loan into those. Yet that can't be everything, right? Cesario knows about 1 or 2 of them, as you said, but more than just 2 accounts belong to the Circle. You wouldn't be so shocked and suspicious if you didn't suspect the Arbiter to have their hands in this mess too. Correct, there is no way that Cesario knows about the others. A few years back, I tried to identify as many accounts belonging to the Circle as possible, just for fun. Of course, I didn't find them all, But after that, I knew which signs to look out for to identify them. And the only one who knows them all is the Arbiter. Any theory why the Arbiter would support those mercenaries? I asked, knowing that Nisko had been a member of the Circle far longer than I and, as such, had more time to get to know the Arbiter. I don't have the slightest idea. Yet I suspect one more thing. And that would be, the first time money got transferred from those accounts to those of the mercenaries was a week before the initial attack on you. The only logical conclusion is that the Arbiter is behind the attacks and the mercenaries. And Cesario is following her orders too, probably to rise above his station, I grumbled. A long and tired sigh escaped me. I think I should thank you for your information. At least I know now my enemy, and I only have to look into their identity. It will be troublesome, but doable. I send him a wry smile. Now let's talk about what you want for that information. You already told me so much without previous payment, but I don't want to owe you anything in the future. Nisko Ron shook his head negatively. I don't need payment for that. This is too important for me than to put a price on it. I raised an eyebrow in response to his words. And is it too presumptuous of me if I ask why? I never expected you to do anything for me out of the good of your heart. It is not. I believe in the Circle and its original idea to support each other to elevate us to greater heights. It turns back to my old mentor, a Solarian who introduced me to Ilium's financial world and trained me to take over his Circle seat after his death. And how did he die? I asked, my eyes narrowing in suspicion. Nisko raised his hand and made a gesture of refusal. I know what you're suspecting, but don't worry, there was nothing unusual about his death. He died of old age. After his death, I got half of his assets, a third went to the Circle, and the rest was shared between the few brothers he could stand. Looks like you want to protect the idea of the Circle in memory of your old mentor. I nodded at his explanation. It wasn't something I could personally understand, as I never had a mentor or but I could draw some parallels in how I would act if someone threatened anything I hold dear. That's right, I also could only rise to the position I now have thanks to the support of the Circle. So to learn that the fundamental idea is being undermined by the Arbiter, the one person who should be absolutely impartial, is something I cannot condone. After Nisko finished his declaration with more passion in his voice than I ever heard him use in front of anyone, a moment of silence passed between us. Yet instead of letting it continue, I decided to ask an important question that would lead us on the correct path to follow through with it. So what should we do about it? We don't know who the Arbiter is. We don't know if it's the same person that we had always thought the Arbiter was, or if it's just someone who can imitate her very well. The last point would at least explain their sudden change in approach. I already thought about that problem. The data I collected when I tried to trace the money flow back to its source should help us in our endeavor immensely. While my contacts are more oriented toward the financial world, I also know the contact details of a few very discreet and capable information brokers here on Ilium. Getting them to help us out was quite easy after paying a small amount of advance payment. They should get back to me in a few days at the latest. And what kind of role have you prepared for me? I don't think that you just want me to be the muscle in this operation, ready to bust in the right heads at the right moment. You would be correct in your assumption, nodded Nisko. As much as it causes me pain to admit, but your resources are by far vaster and more diversified than mine. I will give you the data I have collected so far, and I would like you to start investigating the Arbiter from a different direction than I do. If we compile the information we will come across during our investigation, I believe it will be easy to find out their identity. My suspicion is that the Arbiter is someone close to the Circle, probably a former member at that. In that case, the Arbiter would know how the Circle operates. It would also explain how the Arbiter is selected. You mean in the way of, I benefited from them once, others will benefit now? I couldn't help the scoff that escaped me. That sounds a little bit too idealistic to me. Most people in our position are driven by greed, and there is no place for goodwill if it causes you to lose out on millions of credits. I wouldn't exactly say it that way. Rather, I believe that when the Circle's funds grow, the personal wealth of the Arbiter grows too. That sounds a lot more believable to me, and I guess that also explains why the Arbiter is targeting me right now. My dealings here on Ilium are coming close to an end. Other areas need my overview far more, and because of that, the explosive growth of the Ad-Astra Ilium branch will slow down and put more focus on stabilizing our hold. Right now is the best moment to try to take over when there are still openings to exploit. Perhaps, perhaps not. I don't really know if your suspicion is correct. Your reason doesn't make very much sense to me. After all, even if your Ilium branch doesn't grow anymore, it will still bring in a tidy profit for us all. Of course, it didn't make much sense to him. I just thought up this reason for him to give an explanation for the Arbiter's behavior. It wouldn't do for Nisko-Ron to investigate me and the reason for this escalation. I had been truthful when I said that my time here on Ilium was coming slowly to an end. Other places needed me more, or perhaps it would be better to say I wanted to be elsewhere. Furthermore, my people were getting ready to move against the other members of the council before this whole mess had started. Perhaps the Arbiter had found out about that, or had at least suspicions without concrete evidence, or she would have brought it up with the rest of the council to unite them against me. Anyway, I had been ready to take from the other members what I could before turning my back on them. The council at first had sounded like a good opportunity to further my goals, grow my wealth, and make connections with important people. Yet in retrospect, I could tell that most of the time I invested had been a waste of time. The results didn't measure up to the amount of effort I put in. The connections were pretty decent, with important people within the Turian military and the seedier side of the galaxy, yet the growth of Ad-Astra's wealth had been minimal for such an important world as Ilium. Perhaps it would change in the future, with humanities and my own place more solidified in the eyes of the galaxy. But for now, most of my potential customers still went to established companies. Of course, it was slowly changing, but that was the key word, slowly. I could spend the time needed to change that slowly into a mediocre better at the Citadel. I had been away from Alliance and Citadel politics too long to further my power base in that direction, and the longer I did, the further I would undermine my support in the Alliance by myself, and I took a small breath, returning my concentration to the here and now. How will we exchange information? While I'm confident in my cybersecurity that nobody will be able to listen in on our conversation from my end, I think transferring such sensitive data shouldn't be done over such a connection. I think the same way. I believe you should send a courier to my office. There I will hand over a data disk with the information you need. I will send over one right away. The faster we can get started with our investigation, the better. Nothing more needed to be said, and Nisko cut the connection with one last nod and a promise that the data disk would be ready when my courier arrived. I leaned back in my chair, a small, satisfied smile playing over my lips. I'm getting closer to you. I hope you have put your affairs in order, because when I'm finished with you, you won't have the chance to do anything ever again. Chapter 44. October 26, 2173. 0837 Ilium Tesale System, Nos Astra, en route to Ilium Financial Cooperation. Sheryl Olivier suppressed a sigh that wanted to escape her. She couldn't completely stop it, but in the end, it sounded like she was releasing a long, drawn-out breath. It shouldn't bother her so much to be without any armor, but a kinetic shield generator hidden within her belt. Yet seeing her colleagues sitting kitted out in complete armor sets on the seats on the other side of the shuttle, and to her side, she felt like she was going to walk into a battle zone underdressed. Perhaps she was thinking too heavily about this. It was a simple retrieval mission, and combat was very unlikely. The assault team was only here for the worst-case scenario. One of them would escort her as a guard, but that wouldn't be out of the norm, especially since she dressed like a wealthy businesswoman. Going anywhere as members of Ad-Astra would attract attention due to the current events surrounding the company. So it was imperative to at least try to keep a low profile, and walking into the building of Ilium Financial Cooperation decked out in full gear wasn't the way to do so. We're arriving at IFC's landing pad on the 25th floor in 5 minutes, echoed the voice of the shuttle's pilot through the intercom. Sheryl nodded to herself and answered, "Good, bring us in nice and slow. We don't want it to look like this is even remotely relevant or out of the ordinary. It's just business as usual." "Understood." After giving the pilot his orders, she turned to her fellow security officers to address them. Let's get over the mission one last time. I don't want any misunderstandings to ruin the mission. Mr. Denebrin is counting on us to do this quickly and quietly. So don't go shooting at everything that looks like a threat. She finished with a teasing tone to elevate the tense atmosphere before she could settle in their minds. Her simple efforts got rewarded with chuckles, and Sheryl allowed herself a slight smirk. Don't worry, Vice Commander. We won't. We will wait here and only come out when the situation requires it. And in here, there's nothing we could shoot, not even to dispel boredom. The only one you have to worry about is Donut. He's the one escorting you. I would really prefer if you wouldn't call me by my nickname, Darryl. Not during a mission, and especially not in front of the Vice Commander, whined the one called Donut by his team leader. Oh, now you're caring about your dignity. Need I remind you that the last time we had to look presentable and the powdered sugar all over your uniform? The good one, just because you couldn't resist their call right before the ceremony? There's a reason why we call you Donut, replied Darryl, a teasing smirk plastered over his face, one that didn't waver in the slightest, even when Donut looked like a scolded puppy. That was one time. It never happened again. And it's been almost 2 years by now, came the complaint that got swiftly ignored. By now, even the last vestiges of tension had disappeared with the small laughter that went around at this display of tomfoolery between teammates. Yet Sheryl knew she had to return some of it to keep officers focused on their mission. Now that I know that I will be escorted to our target by Donut, she ignored the suffering groan coming from the person in question. We will go over the plan once again. She looked every security officer in the eye, one after the other, to make sure everyone was listening to her. We will land on the 25th floor, make our way into the building, and up to the 40th floor, to the office of Nisko Ron. When we arrive, we will accept a package that we will promptly deliver back to HQ. The outline of the mission is quite simple, but as we know, situations can quickly change and without any warning. The most problematic thing will not be getting the package, but its safe delivery to Mr. Denebrin. I don't know what is inside, but it's significant for Mr. Denebrin in our efforts against our enemies here on Ilium. And because of that, we can assume that the enemy will do their best to hinder us. So be prepared for anything from the moment we have the package. Why just after that moment? Wouldn't it make more sense for the enemy to prevent us from getting the package in the first place? Asked Thompson, another member of Darryl's team. While they won't swear on it, the analysis teams assume that we won't have any trouble before that because the enemy is trying to keep the fighting limited between our two groups. Dragging in outsiders with enough resources to back them to be a threat to the current balance is suboptimal for them. And an attack on IFC's building wouldn't just drag our benefactor to our side, but dozens of other important people too. That's why we will probably only have to deal with Eclipse or another enemy group on our way back to HQ. Nonetheless, we have prepared a few scenarios if this prediction doesn't hold up, interjected Darryl smoothly, taking over Sheryl's explanation without pausing. An attack before we arrive, an attack while you're in the building, an attack when you're leaving the building. We're ready to jump into any scenario with a plan ready to be employed. That's good, replied Sheryl, pleased that the team chosen to support her during this mission was taking it so seriously and had prepared accordingly. A jerk shook the shuttle, announcing their arrival at the landing pad, and it didn't take much longer after that before the shuttle touched down on it. With but a touch, Sheryl disengaged the belt and stood up, her hands gliding over her business suit to ensure she looked presentable and wouldn't shame the company. Furthermore, she ensured that her weapons were out of sight and that the bulge of her pistol didn't show through her suit jacket. Not far from her, Donut ensured the same, yet additionally checking if his weapons were fully functional and easy to draw in a pinch. He finished his inspection with a halfway satisfied nod before drawing the pistol from his side with his left hand. His Omni tool flared up momentarily on his left arm, and his right hand input a few commands. I just adjusted the magnetic pull a bit. It felt a bit too difficult to draw quickly. Donut commented when he saw Sheryl's questioning look. As long as you ensure the magnetic pull is still strong enough, it would be embarrassing if your pistol falls to the ground when you walk around. Donut turned to his team captain, and even if he wore a helmet that hid his face, Sheryl could picture the indignant look on his face quite clearly. "Don't add more embarrassments to my story," whined Donut. "It's bad enough that you always bring up the donut story whenever we meet new people." The chuckle that went through the group got cut short when a door closer to the cockpit opened and a short burst of wind swept through the shuttle's interior. "All right, guys, this is it," announced Sheryl, confidence in the success of their mission evident in her voice. "Donut, let's get going. The rest, be ready for anything." "We won't let you down, Vice Commander," answered Averill with a sharp salute, copied by the rest of his team. There was nothing more to be said, so Sheryl left the shuttle with Donut following her shortly. The sun was peeking out between the skyscrapers, warming her face and blinding her momentarily, unused to the bright light after traveling under the artificial light of the shuttle's interior for around half an hour. The wind was blowing gently, ruffling her hair slightly. Despite being on the 25th floor, it was unusually gentle and, contrary to belief, not very cold. Sheryl decided to take that as a good omen for the success of the mission, as thinking otherwise would only make her paranoid. Donut patiently waited behind her as she enjoyed the warmth and gentle breeze. Yet despite his willingness to let her set the pace, he asked, "Shall we get going, ma'am?" Without turning to him, Sheryl answered, "We shall," and moved forward with measured steps. They approached the end of the landing platform, where two security guards were waiting for them. One of the two Turians held up his hand and called, "Please stop there. We got a notification that a representative of Ad Astra would arrive here. I assume that's you, but I need to see some identification before I can let you go further." "That's no problem," answered Sheryl, her voice raising a bit in volume so that the two guards could hear her clearly. She activated her Omni tool, sending an identification certificate showing that she was a member of Ad Astra, along with the official notice that they would arrive today. The Omni tool of the guard who asked for the identification flashed up, and the Turian's experienced eyes flew over the information it displayed. It didn't take long before he confirmed to his partner that everything was in order. The guards walked out of the way, and the first one said, "You're good to go. Please remember that brandishing weapons within the premises is cause for immediate eviction and legal prohibition from entering again for at least a year for you and your company. Furthermore, depending on your committed offense, your company has to pay an appropriate fine." Sheryl raised an eyebrow at this sudden exposition of sanctions when someone got caught swinging their weapons around. Sensing the question on her tongue, the Turian decided to explain his actions. "It's standard procedure whenever someone shows up with an armed guard. Some people got impudent when they got evicted and fined. They said they didn't know the rules." "As if. Anyhow, now it's the procedure to explain everything in detail so that nobody gets any ideas." "I see," answered Sheryl slowly, understanding that some idiots always tried to play dumb when they got caught. The one who tried it with IFC was probably paying a far heavier fine after trying than he would have done otherwise. If he had been powerful enough to win this case in front of the courts, he wouldn't have the need to threaten anybody in the first place. "Anyway, everything's fine, so you're clear to enter. Have a good day, ma'am." Without much further ado, she walked into the building, Donut following her only a few steps behind. The hallway they entered was relatively empty, with only a few people walking around from one office to another. Its decor was chaste and tasteful. There were no overt displays of wealth. That was something that the people who rented offices in the building did in their own rooms. Yet Sheryl had expected at least something more than the few plants and statues placed around. Perhaps she was on a too low floor for that, since she knew from talking with members of Ad Astra that had been here on business before that the higher you went in the building, the more wealth got displayed through ancient statues and paintings that would cause art collectors to salivate. The group of two didn't speak or even acknowledge anyone they met on their way toward the elevator, walking silently. The few people they met stepped out of their way, the aura of purposefulness surrounding them enough to avoid Sheryl and Donut. After walking around for a few minutes, they found the elevators and patiently waited until one arrived. One more person, a tenant with an office somewhere on this floor, joined them during the wait, but the Asari kept her distance from them. A soft ding announced the arrival of the elevator, and a handful of people exited it. The mix of Asari, Volus, and Solarians went around the pair of Ad Astra members who entered the elevator afterward. Only a pair of Solarian and Volus were still in it, And after taking a look at the panel, Sheryl noticed that they were moving in the same direction they wanted but would exit 2 floors before them. She pushed the button for the 40th floor and moved to the back of the elevator. Donut stood at her side, a few centimeters removed from the wall, to not hinder drawing his rifle if needed. The Asari that had waited with them for the elevator hadn't entered with them, and Sheryl guessed that she wanted to go down instead of up. The elevator stopped three more times on their way up, either to let people out or in. Nonetheless, it didn't take 4 minutes until Sheryl and Donut arrived on the 40th floor. They left the elevator, followed by a Turian that had entered 3 floors down. Coming out of the elevator, Sheryl could immediately see the difference in decor between this floor and the 25th, where they had entered the building. While it was still tasteful and not cluttered with displays, the used materials were definitely of a higher standard. The small desk at the other end of the small lobby they had arrived in was constructed out of a kind of marble that could be found only in a small, out-of-the-way solar system inside the terminus systems. Its markings, sparkling and soft rainbow tones, were unmissable and caused by the unique makeup of this particular solar system. The cost of mining and transportation could ruin the smaller companies, yet they were a sought-after luxury good for those inside the Citadel territory who could afford it. Sheryl didn't want to know how high the rental fees on this floor were to use such a material for a simple lobby desk. Not intimidated in the slightest by the subtle display of wealth and power, Sheryl approached the desk and the Asari behind it so that she could point them the right way toward Nisko Ron's office and let him know that they had arrived. "Excuse me," she said quietly, to not let her words echo through the lobby and to let eventual listeners know about their business. "We have an appointment with Mr. Nisko Ron. Could you please let him know that we arrived? He will know who we are. And please, could you point us the correct way?" The Asari, dressed in an outfit that hugged her curves tightly, looked up from the computer on her desk and looked at Sheryl and her escort critically, as if to decide by their image alone if they were permitted to be here. "Certainly," the Asari answered, raising her left hand to her ear while her right tipped a few buttons in front of her. "Good morning, Antilla. Here are 2 humans who claim they have an appointment with Mr. Ron. No, they haven't told me from which company. They said Mr. Ron would know. Of course, I can wait a moment." She let her hand down to her computer and continued to work, ignoring Sheryl and Donut after asking them to wait for a moment. Cheryl's lips twitched in annoyance due to the rudeness the Asari showed them. She didn't know if it was because the Asari thought they were unimportant or because they were humans. Had she known for which companies Sheryl and Donut worked, the Asari would have never acted in any way that could have been described as discourteous for fear of it getting back to her superiors. Yet that wasn't possible without drawing too much attention toward them, so Sheryl held her tongue instead of giving the tirade she deserved. Thankfully, they didn't have to wait for long before the receptionist held her hand back to her ear and nodded at whatever was said. After she finished the one-sided conversation, she looked toward Sheryl and said, "The office of Mr. Ron is down this hallway," pointing toward the right. "You take the 4th side corridor to the left and walk down a bit further. It's office number 35. They await you. Have a nice day." And as if there was nothing more to say, she returned to her work immediately. Sheryl turned around toward the right hallway, not bothering to thank the receptionist. Donut threw her a last dismissive look before following his charge. Within minutes, they arrived at the correct side corridor and began walking it down. They were at the door with the number 28 painted on it when Donut suddenly grabbed Cheryl's arm and pulled her back, getting her to stop walking. "What's wrong?" she asked, confused. "I don't know, ma'am," answered Donut, his tone sounding just as confused as she was feeling. "It's too quiet." "Too quiet?" repeated Sheryl. She concentrated on their surroundings, trying to find anything wrong or at least something that would explain Donut's hesitance to go further. "It seems like you're being paranoid. It's good to see that you're vigilant, but you shouldn't overdo it." "Perhaps it was nothing," agreed Donut with a nod, yet Sheryl could still notice that he wasn't absolutely convinced. "Besides, we're inside the IFC building. They wouldn't dare to do—" She was about to finish her sentence when an explosion happened down the hall around the position where she assumed Nisko Ron's office happened to be. Before she could do anything more than blink, Donut grabbed her and threw her down to the ground, positioning himself over her to shield her body from the shockwave and any debris that could be sent their way due to the explosion. Yet, it wasn't debris that came their way, but another explosion, one much closer to them. The shockwave of the explosion threw them over the ground, and while they were rolling, Sheryl could feel how her kinetic shield strained and finally broke. Donut did his best to shield her body, and Sheryl knew that without his help, she would be worse for wear than the simple bruises she would take away from this. She felt the shockwaves weaken, and for a moment she thought that it was over. But there was a soft rumble that got slowly stronger. Her eyes widened when she understood what was going to happen. Sheryl was about to warn Donut when the ground beneath them started to crumble, and they fell. The last thought going through her mind before they crushed on the ground was, fuck. It could have been seconds or minutes, yet Sheryl somehow knew it hadn't been hours that she had been unconscious. Her eyelids fluttered, irritated by the dust floating around. Slowly, ever so slowly, they opened, and the first thing inside her view field was the armor-clad chest of her guard. At first, she didn't know why she saw this particular sight, but with the sudden impact of a lightning strike, her memories of the last few minutes returned. She pushed herself up from her position at Donut's side and tried to get a picture of the situation as fast as possible to formulate a plan. They weren't trapped under rubble, which was the first thing she noticed. Parts of the ceiling were gone, and a few streams of light lit up the place beside a couple of flickering lights. And where there was real light, there also had to be openings for fresh air to get into. After coming to that conclusion, Sheryl could at least drop one potential problem from her list while they waited for someone to rescue them. Typically, she would have looked for a way to rescue herself as her pride, as the vice commander of Ad Astra's local security forces would have demanded it. After all, she hadn't risen to her position by being a damsel in distress whenever the situation turned worse. But one look at Donut was enough to know that he needed her help. Her escort, who had valiantly tried to shield her from damage, was breathing erratically, and one look at his face after Sheryl had pried off his helmet to let him breathe easier was enough to notice that he was barely clinging to consciousness. It wasn't hard to guess why. A slab of metal and cement lay on Donut's left arm, crushing it under its weight. Against such a force, even the best of armor couldn't do much. "Everything's going to be fine," said Sheryl softly, her voice hoarse from the dust she had breathed in. She didn't know if it was to reassure her guard or herself, as she was pretty sure that Donut wasn't in the right state of mind to process anything happening around him. Yet the young man surprised her by chuckling. "I can't feel anything from my left arm, so I know it's pretty bad." A glint had returned to his eyes that had been previously absent. "But it's not too bad overall. An arm is much easier to replace than a life. Do you think the boss will pay for one?" "My bank account isn't full enough to pay for a new state-of-the-art arm." The fact that Donut could make jokes under such circumstances caused Sheryl to shake her head. "It should be covered by the company's health insurance. Something like that." She nodded towards the slab. "Probably counts as a workplace accident." Donut chuckled before he winced and grimaced. "Probably should stop laughing. It hurts." A small smile played over his lips. "On the other hand, even breathing hurts right now, so it doesn't matter anyway." A tense yet relaxed atmosphere surrounded the two. It would take a while until disaster teams could be dispatched and Sheryl could get a clearer picture of the situation. Meanwhile, the only thing she could do was boot up the medical programs on her Omni tool to treat the slim cut on her forehead that she only noticed after blood had run into her eye, and to stabilize Donut's condition as best as Sheryl could with the feeble material she had on hand. At the same time, in an apartment not far from the IFC building, with a perfect view of the destruction the explosions had caused, Volus and Solarian watched how the first disaster teams arrived at the scene. It had not expected them to go so far as to blow up part of the building. A sniper or an assassin. That was what I had expected. But to go so far? It seems like the Arbiter is getting too sure in their position if she decides that a bomb is the way to go. She could step on the toes of some very powerful people with that. "It won't fall back on her," replied the Solarian to the Volus mumbles. "I have ensured that the official story will blame a violent anti-establishment group for the bombing. Of course, your colleague, Mr. Denebrin, will probably suspect the Arbiter or Eclipse, but that doesn't concern us. That wasn't why she hired the Shadow Broker's services." "He's not my colleague anymore," said the Volus. "Nisko Ron died in that explosion, remember? You were hired to accomplish that, after all." And we accomplished that, responded the agent of the shadow broker. Nisko Ron doesn't exist anymore, and as long as you hold your end of the deal, he won't reappear. Because in that case, the shadow broker would have no other option but to fulfill the contract, even if the original client is dead by that time. People can't be allowed to think that the shadow broker's word doesn't hold true. It would shake the system, and something like that cannot be allowed at any cost. I understand, answered the Volus, formerly known as Nisko Ron. I stroke a deal, and I intend to hold on to it. It helps that most people other than Volus can't recognize us if we wear a different environmental suit. So, where am I going, and what will my name be going forward? Instead of answering, the Solarian handed him a data pad with the necessary information. The Citadel, huh? Said Nisko Ron, more to himself than to the shadow broker's agent. At least I will continue my occupation as a banker and financial advisor. Easy to come across information for the broker, too. But that name, couldn't you have chosen something better than Barlavon? Chapter 45. October 26, 2173, 1328. Ilium to Sol System. Nos Astra. Ad Astra HQ, Ilium Branch. A frown found its way onto my face as I observed the destruction of the IF's building displayed on the screen. A dozen or more disaster teams were currently busy with rescue operations or trying to stabilize the debris before parts of it could fall to the ground, potentially hitting someone. Thankfully, Sheryl and Donut, who had been in the center of the destir, had already been evacuated. And apart from Donut's crushed arm and a light concussion on Cheryl's part, nothing serious had happened to them. The doctors were currently trying to make sure that Donut's new stump, after his crushed arm got amputated since it was beyond saving, was clean, not prone to infection, and prepared for the time when the robotic replacement arrived so that it could be attached immediately. The rest of the team I had sent to the IFC building was unhurt due to the fact that they had been flying in a small circle around the surrounding buildings, close enough to be able to react but far enough to be not caught in the explosions. All of that should have helped to improve my mood, yet it was undeniable that this mission had been a disaster. I didn't get the information on the Arbiter and her dealings, no idea about the bank accounts used to finance my enemies, and the one member of the circle I could count on to support me was dead. Nisko Ron's body had been found alongside the body of his secretary, buried under the rubble of what had previously been his office. The body of the Volus was unrecognizable as the epicenter of the first explosion had been directly under his office, and the shockwave had done a number on his body. Only through comparing the body's DNA with the one saved by his personal doctor was identification possible. I got the confirmation that it had indeed been Nisko Ron only a few minutes ago, causing my mood to plummet. The glimmer of hope that Nisko wanted to use a decoy or double during the meeting with my representatives, and that it had been that person who got killed, died when I got the news. The only thing stopping me from declaring this mission and all possible information lost as the officials at the scene prevented my people from searching the area was that I knew how crafty the late Volus could be. It wouldn't surprise me if he had taken this scenario into account and prepared a last fuck you toward the Arbiter and anyone who wanted him dead. Yet, I didn't know which form that would take, and I could only wait until this possible fallback plan started to kick into gear. There wasn't even a single clue to begin my search, so at the moment my opportunities were limited to keeping Eclipse contained and hoping my own investigations into the identity of the Arbiter would bear fruit. I hated it. It was like I could only stay passive for the moment, a situation I disliked immensely. Eclipse was staying under the radar, preparing who knows what with the reinforcements they smuggled onto the planet, and my scouts were having no luck finding their location after they seemingly abandoned their previous main base. It was concerning, to say the least. Without any new information about Eclipse's movements, any action taken would only be a response to theirs. The reactionary way wasn't something I was sure we could or should allow. If anything, it was possibly the worst we could do. Reports about the things Jonas Sideris and those she counted among her most trusted commanders were the things of nightmares for anyone with a halfway decent moral compass. Hostages, blackmail, executions if any enemy ever became enough of a headache or incurred their disdain or anger, were the means Eclipse responded with to break them. I had already issued a warning to my employees about it and to be more careful and report anything they found unusual or out of place. Already, some of my higher-placed employees noticed people following them after their working hours. A few security officers followed them discreetly, but couldn't follow them back to their base. Afterward, the stalkers seemingly disappeared, yet the unease in my chest remained. Eclipse was planning something that would hit me hard and force me to act, and I didn't know what. That the situation was frustrating was the least I could say. While I watched the news feed, I heard someone approaching me from behind. The fact that none of the guards placed around the room reacted was enough to tell me that it was someone I could trust without reservation. Well, without reservation, in certain matters. A disaster, isn't it? I sighed when the person was close enough. And I'm not speaking about the mission failure. The senseless loss of life is always a disaster, replied Commander Bubbel, the calm expression on her face not covering the emotions held in her eyes. I wouldn't call it senseless, I countered. Their deaths had meaning, a meaning they didn't choose to or would have ever agreed to, but a meaning nonetheless. Sir, responded Commander Bubbel, and I could hear the question in that single word as if she had formulated a whole sentence. It's a warning to us. A single precision strike to kill Nisko Ron would have been enough if the only objective had been to deny us information. Even a smaller bomb that would have taken out the retrieval team too would have been better. Yet, they chose to do something like this. Now, what do you think does that tell us? That they are willing to do whatever is necessary to achieve their goals. The answer came with an amount of certainty behind it that was at the same time confident as well as hesitant to commit to it fully. In parts, I agreed with a nod. Of course, there's the point you have made. Another would be a demonstration of power and influence, the certainty to get away with such a grand display. There are already the whispers that this was the work of some extremists who fight against the capitalist oppression of this world. A lie, no doubt. Yet, it is one the masses and most of the people harmed in this attack will believe. It shows us how far the reach of the enemy is and their influence on this planet's government, that the investigation into this incident will lead in that direction and end there too. I would have thought that Ilium's matriarchs wouldn't back down if something like that happened. That would only apply if our enemy was the one to conduct this attack, I responded, a small smile finding its way onto my face. I thought you said it was them who did it, asked Commander Bubbel, and I could see her confused facial expression from the corner of my eye after she positioned herself next to me. You confuse organizing and conducting, I replied. Our enemy organized the attack, yet it was a third party who conducted it. I imagine the Arbiter, who I believe is behind the attack, hired the shadow broker. He's the only one with enough power and blackmail material to even get Ilium's matriarchs to dance after his music. Anyone else, and they would have a horde of angry, powerful Asari after their asses. And how do we prevent the Arbiter from hiring the shadow broker again to do the same to us? Asked a baby, the worry plain to hear in her voice. I could understand her. The shadow broker was a formidable enemy, and I was kicking myself 1,000 times and more for not writing down the planet's name or even the name of the solar system where he hid when I still remembered it. I should have expected it, really, that over the course of my life, I would forget details about the Mass Effect games. In my defense, no, there was no defense. I had been arrogant or perhaps negligent, and now it came back to bite me. Thankfully, after recognizing my mistake, I took the time to note down important pieces of information, like the Prothean beacon on Thessia, and hid that information. Of course, I also made sure that in the event of my death, this information would find its way toward Andrew, the only person I could trust to use it in a way that would aid the Alliance more than only himself. I have it handled, I said, trying to reduce Commander Bubbel's apprehension. It only worked slightly, forcing me to elaborate. I sent one of our agents to an information broker confirmed to work for the shadow broker. The broker is relatively low in the hierarchy, yet has the means to contact the shadow broker. Our agent will make the offer that we will pay him to do nothing. Is that wise, sir? As much as I dislike the idea, wouldn't it be better to get the shadow broker on our side and have him strike against the Arbiter, she asked. and I could hear the obvious disgust at the idea and herself for even thinking and voicing it. After all, the commander wasn't the kind of person who liked working with what she described as the scum of the galaxy, and she had, on numerous occasions, argued against cooperating with Ilium's street gangs in matters of security. That she had even been willing to entertain the idea spoke well of her newly acquired flexibility in such matters. Yet, while my following words were probably not the ones she wanted to hear, she looked relieved nonetheless. I would rather that this stays between us and the Arbiter. Involving a third party, especially one as powerful and ambiguous as the Shadow Broker, would only invite a bidding war between us for his services. I avoided the word loyalty because I knew that the broker's loyalty was only to himself. Besides, even if we continuously win the bidding war against the Arbiter, we never can be absolutely sure about the Shadow Broker's motives. He will always try to get us under his control, and while the saying goes to keep your enemies closer than your friends, I am loath to do so with an enemy as nebulous as the Shadow Broker. I finished with a sharp smile that reflected my unease at the thought of letting the Shadow Broker's agents close enough to allow them to snoop around unimpeded. A single nod from Commander Abebe signaled to me that she understood my reasoning. Silence descended between us as the topic got closed with my last words, and the commander stood quietly at my side as we watched the newsfeed together. My right index and middle finger tapped the armrest of my chair in a random rhythm as my focus drifted away from the ongoing events at the IFC building and to what measures could be taken to take away the initiative from Eclipse and the Arbiter. I didn't know how often I already mentioned it, but I disliked being on the back foot with those two, yet without further information, it would be hard to seize the momentum and direct how our war would continue. As I was thinking about a possible way to draw the Arbiter out into the light and eliminate her, which also would probably end our problems with Eclipse, my thoughts were interrupted by rapidly approaching steps that echoed through the room. Commander Abebe tensed next to me and turned toward the approaching person, her hand twitching toward her pistol, ready to draw it if it became necessary. She relaxed marginally after she identified the person, and curious as I was, I also turned toward the newcomer. The man coming closer to us was relatively young, mid-20s at maximum, if I had to guess, and wore the simple black suit pants combined with a white dress shirt out of his waistband on one side, probably from running here. That he had been running was easy to infer from his red head, the sweat on his brow, the slightly heavy breathing, and his general disheveled appearance. The standard employee identification hung on a strap around his neck, identifying him as a member of the analyst division. I raised my eyebrow in curiosity. What happened that was so important that caused this young man to make a mad dash? As he came closer and was only a few steps away, Commander Abebe calmly ordered, "I think that is far enough. Please identify yourself and tell us the reason for your coming." Despite the calm tone she used, the unspoken message of, "Come any closer, and I don't care who you are. You will regret it," was heard loud and clear, most of all by the young man who froze mid-step with an expression that conveyed his thoughts about what possibly could happen to him very well. "I'm sorry, sir, for coming in unannounced," said the young analyst quickly, his voice slightly squeaking in the face of unspoken, but promised violence if he did the wrong thing. The light smile I sent him helped calm him down enough that his voice returned to its usual level when he continued. Yet he still spoke a little faster. If that was usual for him, I couldn't say without meeting him a second time. "I'm Harrison Gober, and I've been working down an information for a few months," he continued, and it was good to put a name to the young man instead of just calling him that. "We got a data package from an unknown source a few minutes ago, at best half an hour ago, and well, with most of us busy with going over the incident at IFC with a fine-tooth comb, it fell to me to watch the video and, well, I don't really know how to say it, but..." Harrison got more and more quiet toward the end until he completely stopped, looking extremely uncomfortable with whatever was displayed in the video. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in curiosity, yet something in my gut told me I wouldn't like what he had to say about it. Nonetheless, I probably needed to know about it. My own and Harrison's sensibilities be damned. "Spit it out," I said, my tone harsher than I intended, causing the young analyst to jerk slightly in his place. "Of course, sir," he answered, pulling up a data pad I hadn't noticed previously. It's better if you watch it on here. I think it's better not to use the big screen. The content is disturbing and would probably cause panic if shown too publicly. Mr. Connolly ordered us down in information to keep a lid on it for the moment until you decide how to proceed. Something ugly twisted itself into a knot inside my stomach. Connolly was the head of the information division, and normally he wasn't a man prone to exaggerations. Instead, it was more likely he did the opposite. So when he said that the video could cause a panic among the staff, it was almost certain that it would cause one. "Show me," I said, projecting more confidence than I felt. Harrison tried to hand me the tablet after opening the video, but Commander Abebe intercepted his attempt, taking the datapad for herself and holding it in front of me so we both could watch it. A little paranoid on her part, but I didn't voice any objection after the last few weeks we had, and it was probably better to let her do as she wanted concerning my security. It would be less of a hassle than arguing with her. Simple tipping on the tablet started the video, and I immediately had to stop myself from snarling at what I saw. There were 4 humans, 3 men and 1 woman, on their knees, their faces bloodied, and their hands and arms pulled backward, probably cuffed too. Yet what truly raised my hackles were the Eclipse soldiers positioned around them. Their weapons visible but not trained on their prisoners. "Is it on?" asked a female voice from the off-screen, and a moment later an Asari stepped into the picture with a smile on her face. Some would call it a serene smile, one that someone content with their life would wear. But that wasn't what I was seeing. Instead, I saw the smile of someone who enjoyed the casual cruelty they inflicted on people just because they could. It was enough that an inkling of what was to come settled in my mind, and I had to actively fight the anger and disgust that rose up inside of me to continue to watch the video. "Hi there," the Asari said. "I hope that the big bad boss of Ad Astra is seeing this because, well, it's a message to you. My big boss is quite cross with you and your doings against our newest employer on Ilium. The fact that our Eclipse is getting pushed back by a small-time security force of some company, a human one at that, is not doing us any favors for our reputation. So Jonah wants to make a statement and issue a warning that you should take heed of." The Asari pulled a pistol from her side and skipped behind the bound hostages who started to beg and plead. "And she gave me the choice of how the warning should be issued," the Asari continued, and a cruel smile appeared on her face. "So I gathered a few of your people. Nobody important, I assure you, but perfect for what I intend to do. See, if I'm willing to do this to some random employee of yours, who's to say what I will do to one with actual importance to you?" When she finished, she leveled the pistol at the back of the head of the rightmost hostage and pulled the trigger without hesitation. I reflexively closed my eyes as the shot sounded out of the tablet, and I took a deep breath to calm my rapidly beating heart. Furthermore, I could feel how the blood in my veins turned cold, and yet, at the same time, unimaginably hot. Commander Abebe let out a snarl next to me. Right now, she looked and sounded like a wild hound, ready to be let off the leash to hunt down those who had offended her and finish them off in a very bloody way. I was tempted to do so. I forced myself to keep watching, yet whatever happened in the video didn't want to settle inside my mind. The ringing in my ears got more deafening with every second as I watched how the Eclipse Asari made grand gestures and wild claims about how Eclipse would grind my company to dust, executing the remaining hostages along the way. Every time she shot one, the corners of my mouth twitched in anger, and as the video ended, Harrison took the tablet out of Commander Abebe's still hands. I continued to stare at the place where I just watched innocent people being executed for the crime of working for me. My eyes turned toward the young analyst, and I didn't know what he was seeing, but he jerked back in fright when my eyes met his. "What did you find out?" I asked, my voice thick with anger. "The Asari is an Eclipse commander with the name Kalara Iori. We don't have much about her personal history, but we do know that she is one of Jonah Sidaris's top commanders. Reports indicate that this," he hesitatingly gestured toward the tablet in his hands, "isn't the first time she employed such a method to intimidate her opponents. It will be the last time she does. I will personally make sure of that," interjected Commander Abebe with a furious expression. "Did you identify the hostages?" I asked calmly. "And more importantly, have you found the location in the video? I want their bodies back. They deserve a proper burial." The sudden calm that fell over me somehow didn't feel right to me. I wanted to scream, to throw things around, and yet all I could feel was calmness. We know the names of the hostages, and Mr. Conley already ordered some of the other analysts to identify the location. I don't know if they made any progress while I was coming here, came Harrison's response. Bringing them home is our first priority, I said while closing my eyes. Also, arrange for their families everything they would need to have a good life. A pension, college funds for the children, and so on. Somewhere deep in Alliance territory. Furthermore, warn everyone that they could be targeted by Eclipse, and tell them that if they came with their families to Ilium, we will take over the costs for their relocation. I kept my eyes closed as Harrison left the room to communicate my orders. I kept my eyes closed as Commander Ababy asked me what we should do about Eclipse. I kept my eyes closed as my heartbeat slowly calmed down, and a burning cold started to flow through my veins. And when my eyes opened, I wouldn't have recognized the look in them if I had looked into a mirror. The look of someone ready to burn down an organization of immense influence and power, and happily dance on its ashes. You ask me what we will do about Eclipse, I asked, a deadly calm seeping into my words that had Commander Abebe standing at attention immediately. I'll tell you what we will do. I don't care if this Iori, or however she is called, did this on Sedaris's orders. I don't care if Sedaris knew about it, and then and I definitely don't care if this will take years, but it will be done. I turned toward the commander and fixated her with a stare that would have lesser people quivering in their boots, and even Commander Abebe took a step back reflexively. Contact every captain, commander, and lieutenant in the Ad Astra security forces and tell them that every Eclipse member is now on our blacklist. There will be no negotiations with them. There will be no mercy. Eclipse wants power so much that they would stoop to such measures. Then we will help them realize that actions do have consequences. I wonder if they will still be so quick to use such barbarous measures against us if they won't be able to take any step without fearing that we come around the corner to put them down quickly. Perhaps I was overreacting, yet I couldn't help but do it anyway. Eclipse had hit me where it hurt the most, and now I wanted blood. And I wouldn't just be satisfied with getting even. I would hurt Eclipse so much that their very survival as an entity would hinge upon not getting in my way ever again. Commander Abebe looked at me silently, her thoughts unknown to me, but it took only moments before she nodded resolutely. Without any more words, she left my side to contact her fellow commanders to begin to spread the word about my decision. With a deep and heavy sigh, I leaned back in my chair. The coming weeks would be difficult, yet I had decided to follow that course, and I would follow it to the end. And who knows, perhaps the Alliance would be better served if no Eclipse member ever dared to step foot in its territory.